The world had always been loud, full of engines, voices, screens, and every kind of noise people created to drown out the quiet questions they didn't want to answer. But on the night, everything changed. The world went silent. Not because something attacked, and not because a great disaster struck, but because Earth itself seemed to pause, as if taking a long breath it had been holding for centuries. No one noticed the silence at first. People were too busy rushing to work, checking messages, or running late for something they didn't even care about. Yet, beneath the concrete and steel, beneath the seas and forests and ancient mountains, something older than humanity stirred. And while people believed they ruled the planet, they never realized the planet had its own boundaries, its own patience, and its own breaking point for generations. Humans had built systems that didn't just organize life, but controlled it. They built cages that didn't always look like cages. They built rules that didn't always feel like chains. And they convinced themselves that everything on Earth, including Earth itself, existed to serve them. Most didn't intend harm. Many didn't even notice the cost. But the harm was still happening, and the cost was still rising. They called their progress necessary. They called their habits normal. And step by step, without even realizing it, they shaped a world where nearly every species, every plant, animal, and even humans themselves functioned inside forms of quiet servitude. It wasn't the dramatic kind people read about in history books. It was slow, invisible, threaded into daily routines. Forests cleared without second thought. Animals bred only to be used. People pushed into cycles they couldn't escape. Oceans turned into dumping grounds. Technology built without limits. The planet treated like it would last forever, and while people argued about who was to blame, Earth listened to none of their excuses. It simply observed, watched, waited. The first person to sense that something was wrong was a wanderer who lived far from the noise of cities. He didn't call himself a leader or a prophet. He didn't have a grand mission. He just liked silence. He liked walking through forests where the trees leaned close to each other like old friends. He liked watching streams curl around stones the way they had done for thousands of years. But on this particular morning, the forest didn't sound like a forest. No rustling, no birdsong, no hum of insects. The air felt heavy, as if the sky itself was holding a secret. He placed a hand on the trunk of an old tree. Usually, he felt a faint warmth, a sense of life pulsing inside it. This time, it was different. The tree felt tense, almost rigid, as though bracing for something. He pulled his hand back slowly, unsure if he should be curious or afraid. Across the world, similar small moments unfolded, moments most people ignored but couldn't fully dismiss. Gardeners noticed plants curling away from sunlight. Farmers saw animals stare at the sky for long stretches of time. Ocean researchers reported that deep-sea sensors were picking up vibrations, but no one understood where they came from. Even city dwellers, who rarely noticed anything beyond traffic and schedules, felt a strange pressure in the air, like the weight of an approaching storm that refused to break. By the second day, the silence was impossible to ignore. Birds didn't migrate. Waves slowed down as if dragged by an unseen force. Even the wind hesitated, moving with a strange stiffness. And people across the globe experienced sudden, vivid dreams of dark roots stretching across continents, glowing cracks beneath the ocean floor, clouds swirling in shapes that looked almost like eyes watching from above. Some woke feeling calm. Others woke terrified. But no one woke unchanged. The wanderer tried to explain what he sensed to the few people he knew, but most brushed it aside. They blamed the weather, this season, their own stress. Yet everyone carried unease in their voices. No one wanted to admit that the world they depended on felt like it was preparing for something by the end of the week. Strange events started appearing online. Rivers reversed direction for minutes at a time. Storms formed in places that had never seen storms. Giant flocks of animals moved in perfect spirals, as if drawn toward invisible centers. And then came the message, the one moment that unified the world's confusion into pure fear. It started with a tremor felt across every continent. Not strong enough to destroy anything, but unmistakable in its intention. It wasn't random. It wasn't natural in the way tremors usually were. It felt like a warning knock on a door people didn't realize they had locked. Then came a voice, no one heard it with their ears. It arrived in their minds like a memory that wasn't theirs. A soft, low tone, almost human, but impossibly old. A voice layered with echoes, as if spoken from within mountains, oceans, and storms all at once. You have been heard. The words repeated again and again in every language. Inside every mind, reaching places where no message had ever traveled before. People froze. Some dropped whatever they were holding. Others stared into nothing with wide, stunned eyes. You have been heard. The wanderer fell to his knees, not from fear, but from awe. It felt like the planet itself was speaking not as a place, but as a being. A presence. A force woven into everything from soil to sky. Then the voice faded, leaving behind a quiet so sharp that even the smallest sound felt loud, scientists argued. Leaders panicked, and people everywhere tried to explain the impossible event. But deep down, no one doubted what they had felt. Earth had spoken. And the message was not a plea. It was not a request. It was a judgment. As days passed, humanity tried to pretend life could go back to normal. But nature refused. Earth's reactions grew stronger, more intentional. Storms spun in patterns too perfect to be accidents. Earthquakes pulsed rhythmically like a heartbeat. The ground in some places opened not violently, but slowly, as if making room for something beneath. People began to wonder if every species, every form of life, had been warning them all along. Not with words, but with their silence, their disappearance, their struggles. And no one could deny the truth anymore. Humans had ignored signs for too long. The quiet forms of control they placed on every corner of life had spread farther than they. Realized now Earth was answering. One night, just as fear and confusion reached their peak, the sky changed. A strange shimmer rippled across the stars, like a curtain of light bending in directions light wasn't meant to move. The wanderer stood alone in a clearing, staring upward as the air vibrated again. It felt like the moment before a final verdict. The voice returned stronger this time, deeper, filled with something heavier than anger. A cycle closes. The ground trembled beneath his feet. Trees leaned as if listening. The air turned cold, and then the voice whispered something new, something no one had heard before, something that made the wanderer's breath catch in his throat as he tried to understand its meaning. The earth beneath him split with a soft crack, not destructive, but deliberate. A quiet invitation. He stepped back, heart pounding, realizing that this was only the beginning. Earth had spoken once more. And what came next would decide the fate of every civilization ever built. What he saw rising from the glowing crack made him freeze in place because it wasn't fire, and it wasn't smoke. It was something far more unsettling. But before he could take a closer look, the light expanded, swallowed the clearing, and everything went white. The next moment never came. Not yet. When the white light finally thinned and faded, the wanderer found himself standing in the same clearing, but everything felt different. The trees were still there, their branches unchanged, yet they felt older, like centuries had passed in an instant. The air was colder, too, carrying a faint scent of stone and soil that didn't belong to the season. He blinked several times, trying to steady his breathing and understand what had just happened. The glowing crack that had opened beneath him was gone, sealed as if it had never existed. But the memory of the light lingered in his bones. Pulsing faintly like a second heartbeat, he looked down at his hands, expecting them to show some sign of what he had witnessed to burn. A mark, a tremor, but they looked perfectly normal. Too normal. The silence around him pressed down with the weight of an unanswered question. Whatever he had seen rising from the crack remained hidden behind the blinding light. And that mystery gnawed at him more than fear ever could. He took a slow breath and stepped backward, testing the ground as though it might shift again. Nothing moved. The forest faded back into its quiet stillness. Birds remained absent. The wind barely touched the leaves. It was as if the world had paused, waiting for him to make the next move. But he wasn't sure which move to make, far beyond the forest. In the busy towns and crowded cities, people were grappling with their own strange experiences. Reports were spreading of sudden bursts of white light appearing in unexpected places on beaches, in mountain valleys, near old lakes, and even in the middle of some streets. They came and vanished within seconds, leaving behind confused witnesses who described the same sensation. A feeling of being watched by the Earth itself. Scientists rushed to analyze the incidents, but the data made no sense. There were no traces of radiation, no seismic activity, no weather patterns that could explain the lights. Nothing measurable remained, and that terrified everyone even more. Technology had always given people a sense of control, a belief that everything could be explained if you dug deep enough. But now, for the first time in generations, the world faced something that didn't fit into any formula. The wanderer left the clearing and began walking toward the small town several miles away. He felt compelled to tell someone what he had experienced, even if he knew they might not believe him. But as he walked, he noticed subtle changes around him. Certain trees had shed their leaves overnight despite being out of season. Small patches of moss pulsed faintly with a dim green glow, as though responding to the light that had engulfed him. And the soil beneath his boots felt softer, almost warm, as if it had recently been disturbed from deep within. He paused at a stream he often visited. Its water usually ran clear and quick, but now it drifted sluggishly, carrying small fragments of dark, brittle material that the wanderer had never seen before. He crouched beside the water, reached in, and picked up one of the fragments. It looked like a piece of ancient bark, but it was cold and dense, almost metallic. When he held it close, he felt a faint vibration, like a weak heartbeat. He quickly set it back into the water, unsettled. Across the world, similar strange materials were being discovered. Pieces found near the glowing lights had patterns etched onto their surfaces, patterns resembling roots, waves, and mountain ridges. People posted pictures online, trying to decipher the symbols. Some believed it was a message from nature. Others feared it was a warning. No one could agree on its meaning, but everyone sensed it wasn't random. The wanderer finally reached the edge of town, where the streets were unusually quiet. A group of people stood near a community board, staring at a poster someone had put up overnight. The poster showed a sketch of the strange lights with the words, "Did you see this? Share your story." Beneath the message were several handwritten notes from others who had experienced something similar. Some described hearing a faint voice. Others mentioned strange dreams. A few claimed they felt the earth move beneath them for a moment, even though no earthquake had been recorded. Seeing the poster gave the wanderer a small sense of relief. He wasn't alone. Whatever was happening was bigger than he imagined. He walked to a cafe he occasionally visited and found a few people gathered around a small radio placed on a counter. The radio crackled with static before a reporter's voice broke through. Global phenomenon continues to confuse experts. Governments are urging calm as investigations expand. Meanwhile, many communities are reporting unusual behavior from animals and plants, raising questions about whether the planet is undergoing a natural shift or something entirely new. Someone turned up the volume as the reporter continued. In several regions, forests have begun to change color overnight. Coastal areas are observing unusual tides. And in certain cities, people are reporting what they call ground pulses, brief moments where the earth seems to throb like a living body. The wanderer felt a chill run down his spine. He had felt the same throb in the clearing. He wanted to share what he saw, but the words didn't come easily. Instead, he stayed quiet and listened. Another voice joined the broadcast, an expert of some kind. Some theories suggest that Earth systems may be reacting to long-term environmental stress. Others claim the phenomenon might be linked to a rare geological cycle. But there are growing reports from individuals describing what they believe is direct communication from the Earth. These claims remain unverified. Someone in the cafe scoffed under their breath. Another person whispered that they had seen a light in the sky the previous night. Everyone seemed to be dealing with their own version of uncertainty. The wanderer stepped back outside and looked toward the forest. He had just left. From where he stood, it looked perfectly normal, but he knew it wasn't. He felt a pull, a strange urge to return, as if something inside the forest was calling him back. But he pushed the feeling aside. For now, he spent the rest of the day walking through town, listening to conversations, watching people react to the growing mystery. Some were afraid. Some were curious. Some tried to pretend nothing had changed at all. But deep down, everyone sensed the world had crossed an invisible line as night approached. New storms appeared on the horizon, storms that didn't move like normal storms. They formed sharp spiral shapes, almost geometric in pattern, glowing faintly at their edges. Meteorologists tried explaining them, but the explanations grew weaker with every new image released. The wanderer stayed awake long after dusk, sitting near the window of a small room he had rented. He watched the sky flicker with strange lights, listened to the distant rumble of the unusual storms, and replayed the voice he had heard in the clearing. A cycle closes. He feared what that meant. He feared what might be beginning in its place, somewhere deep within the forest he had left behind. Roots shifted beneath the soil. A faint glow pulsed through underground chambers no human had ever seen. Rivers adjusted their paths ever so slightly, as if turning toward something. And the mountains, silent and ancient, felt vibrations rising through their cores. Earth was moving, reacting, preparing. The wanderer lay awake, unable to shake the feeling that everything was rushing toward a moment to moment that humanity was not ready for. He closed his eyes for just a second, trying to gather his thoughts when a low, distant hum rose from beneath the ground. It grew steadily louder, vibrating through the walls into the floor, and then into his chest. He sat up sharply. Heart pounding, the hum deepened, shifted, became almost a whisper. And this time, it wasn't a message meant for the world. It was meant for him. You were shown the first light. The voice murmured from the earth below. He froze. And now, you must see what follows. The floor trembled softly. He stared at the ground, breath unsteady, as the hum grew stronger. And a faint glow began to seep through the cracks near the base of the wall, spreading like veins of light. Reaching toward him, the next moment hovered in the stillness, waiting to break. And when it did, nothing would be the same. The glow seeped across the floorboards like liquid light, thin and restless, crawling along the walls in a way that felt alive. The wanderer stared, frozen, unable to step back. He had no idea what would come next, but instinct told him it wasn't ordinary. It felt deliberate. Earth itself was reaching into his room, touching a human for the first time in a long time. Outside, the storms churned in chaotic spirals, lightning tracing impossible angles in the sky. People across the world pointed upward, some in fear, some in awe, as if witnessing something holy and terrifying at once. From distant mountaintops to city rooftops, The atmosphere felt charged with a silent accusation. Humanity had been careless, arrogant, blind, and now the planet was forcing attention. News stations struggled to keep pace. The reports were inconsistent, chaotic, and the panic was spreading faster than the information. In one coastal city, a massive flock of birds hovered in perfect formation over the bay, circling endlessly. Fishermen tried to navigate the waters, but the birds refused to disperse. No one knew why. Across the desert plains of another continent, sand dunes shifted overnight into patterns resembling massive roots, stretching far wider than any storm could shape them. Geologists were baffled, and locals whispered that the land itself was thinking, moving with purpose, in the wanderer's town. Small groups of people gathered in front of screens, radios and phones, trying to track every new occurrence. Conversations turned heated as theories collided. Some insisted this was the Earth's natural cycle, an ancient rhythm finally revealing itself. Others swore it was a punishment, a form of justice for centuries of exploitation. One woman, her eyes wide with panic, suggested the planet was choosing sides, responding only to those who had caused harm. A man argued that no explanation mattered. Survival was the only question now. The wanderer didn't speak. He felt out of place in this group of fear and speculation. His experience in the clearing and the crack in the ground had been personal. And yet he could feel the tremors of that same energy everywhere. He realized the planet was sending signals, but the signals were layered messages for humanity as a whole, and messages for individuals who were capable of perceiving them. He didn't know why he was one of them. That night, he returned to the forest. Something had shifted since the first encounter. Shadows moved differently, more deliberately, as if the trees themselves were aware of his presence. The hum from the ground beneath him grew stronger, pulsing with an almost rhythmic cadence. He followed the sound until he reached a clearing he had never noticed before. A circle of ancient stones arranged with perfect symmetry. Each stone seemed alive, faintly glowing at its edges, vibrating in resonance with the pulse beneath the soil. He knelt beside one of the stones, pressing a hand against its rough surface. Images flashed before his eyes, visions of humans, taking, bending, controlling, destroying. Forests cleared with machines, rivers dammed, mountains scarred, oceans emptied. He saw every species, every life form, responding in its own small way, resisting quietly, until the cumulative burden became too great. And then he saw it. The moment Earth decided enough was enough. The vision ended abruptly. The stones were silent, but the pulse remained, stronger than ever. The wanderer felt a weight settle into his chest, a pressure he couldn't lift, a responsibility he hadn't asked for. Meanwhile, in a city far from the forest, other individuals were experiencing something similar. A farmer, alone in his fields, felt the soil vibrate beneath his boots. He bent down and pressed his palms into the ground, only to see tiny luminescent threads crawling along the dirt, moving toward him like fingers. A scientist in a laboratory noticed the equipment malfunctioning in strange, synchronized patterns, almost as if the Earth was sending data in a language she had yet to understand. A child in a small village stared out at a storm that seemed to bend its own lightning into spirals above her house. And she whispered that the clouds looked like they were watching. All these events were separate, yet connected threads of a single story unfolding across the globe. The planet was alive with intention, communicating in ways humans could barely comprehend. And for those sensitive enough to perceive it, the message was clear. Humanity's dominance had been tolerated for too long. And now the world would demand reckoning. The wanderer returned to town as the first streaks of dawn appeared. The sky was still chaotic, a swirling mixture of strange colors and impossible shapes. The people he encountered didn't recognize him at first, his eyes shadowed and distant from the intensity of the forest. He tried to explain what he had seen, But no words could capture the pulse of the planet or the depth of the living energy he had felt. Some nodded politely, others stepped back in fear. He realized that human perception was limited, and that most wouldn't understand until the planet acted directly. As the day progressed, small conflicts began to emerge. Communities started arguing over resources that were behaving unpredictably. Rivers that had shifted slightly threatened farmland. Forests that had moved their growth patterns disrupted local ecosystems. Tensions rose. Some blamed the authorities, others blamed each other. The planet's response wasn't destructive yet, but the ripple effects were already causing chaos in human systems, exposing vulnerabilities and testing resilience. In another town, a teacher tried to gather children for class, but the animals in nearby fields refused to move. Birds gathered overhead in patterns that blocked sunlight. Livestock huddled at the edges of fences, trembling, refusing to enter barns. Even pets at home acted strangely, pawing at the ground, staring at corners of rooms no one could see. The children were terrified, and the teacher felt powerless. Realizing the natural order they had taken for granted was no longer predictable. Back in the forest, the wanderer returned to the stone circle again that night. The glow had intensified, and the vibrations had grown more insistent. He pressed both hands against the central stone and closed his eyes, letting the pulse wash through him. This time, the visions were not only of the past, but of the future civilizations struggling. Cities crumbling under forces beyond comprehension, humanity being forced to reckon with its choices. Yet, among the chaos, he glimpsed moments of hope. People cooperating, healing damaged land, listening rather than dominating, learning humility in the face of something far larger than themselves. The duality of the vision left him shaken. Earth's fury was coming, but it wasn't purely destruction. There was also a call for awareness, for change, for alignment with life rather than against it. But would humanity answer in time? Or would pride and fear prevent them from understanding the warning until it was too late? In the city, the hum of the earth began to influence technology. Power grids flickered, networks transmitted errors no one could explain, and strange patterns appeared in satellites imaging data. Some interpreted it as a threat, others as a puzzle. Hackers and scientists alike struggled to decipher the sudden influx of irregular signals, but nothing in human logic fully accounted for what they were witnessing. The planet had entered their systems, bending human tools in a way that made them simultaneously useful and incomprehensible. Communities began to splinter. Groups emerge, some wanting to flee, some wanting to fight the unknown, and some attempting to communicate with the earth using meditation, music, and other rituals to understand what was happening. Rumor spread of people entering forests and returning changed, with insights about the land, water, and sky that no one else could articulate. Some called them prophets. Others feared they had been touched by something dangerous. Through it all, the wanderer stayed focused on the pulse beneath his feet. He realized that humanity was not yet ready to face the planet's full power, but the planet had chosen to make the first move anyway. Every glowing light, every shifted river, every vibrating stone was part of a larger message. The world had moved beyond warning. It was initiating a reckoning at the edges of civilization. Subtle but deliberate transformations began. Coastal waters rose slightly at random intervals, not enough to destroy, but enough to challenge human infrastructure. Trees grew in ways that blocked streets and highways. Mountains released faint tremors in carefully measured sequences. And animals, previously subdued by human control, began acting with strange intelligence, avoiding areas, gathering together, sometimes even directly confronting humans, who moved recklessly through the land. The tension in the human world reached a new height. Governments convened emergency meetings. Communities barricaded towns or fled to safer regions. Scientists raced to interpret phenomena, Ordinary people struggled to understand what was happening in their own backyards. Every news cycle brought new images of lights, storms, and patterns that defied explanation. Panic simmered beneath the surface, and the wanderer felt the pressure in his chest grow with every passing hour. Back in the forest, he knew the moment of true confrontation was approaching. The pulse had become almost unbearable. It was no longer just a message, it was preparation. Earth was readying itself for a move that humans could neither predict nor stop. He understood that the first lights, the shifting rivers, and the spiraling storms were only the beginning. The planet was testing, probing, and gathering strength. He knelt once more in the stone circle, closing his eyes, and listened. The pulse had a pattern now, a rhythm he could almost follow. And then he realized he wasn't meant to stop it. He was meant to witness it, to guide, to bear knowledge of what was coming. But even with this understanding, dread gnawed at him. Humanity had been given warnings, signs, and messages, and still, few were prepared. The planet's patience was near its end. A final faint rumble rose beneath the ground, rolling outward in waves he could feel even through the soles of his boots. It was low, steady, and filled with intent. The earth whispered its verdict, and the wanderer knew that soon the world would witness a force no human imagination had ever truly comprehended. And yet, the first moment of that force, the one that would define the coming age, had not yet revealed itself. The world waited. The pulse continued, and the reckoning was about to begin. The pulse beneath the ground had grown insistent. No longer a gentle rhythm, but a deep, commanding vibration that shook the air and made the wanderer's chest ache. Every step he took toward the forest felt like walking across the strings of a massive instrument, one that only the planet could play. It was as if Earth was not only alive, but aware, and it was preparing for something no one could predict. News across the world became frantic. Cities reported unexplainable tremors. Rivers changed course overnight, swallowing roads and fields. Trees moved slowly, almost imperceptibly, to block highways. People began to panic, scrambling for safety, but there was no instruction manual, no predictable logic for the chaos. Every attempt to control or adapt seemed to fail. Even advanced technology betrayed them. Satellites captured impossible shapes in the skies, and sensors designed to monitor seismic activity reported values beyond comprehension. In a coastal town, residents gathered on the docks to watch the ocean behave unnaturally. Waves rose and fell in precise, almost mechanical patterns, forming spirals that twisted inland. Fish leaped in synchronized arcs, then vanished beneath the surface, leaving ripples that spread like a warning. The people were terrified but mesmerized. The water moved as if alive, a creature of intention, not instinct. Some whispered that the oceans themselves had become judges. Delivering Earth's verdict, the wanderer returned to the stone circle. Each night, he felt the vibrations grow stronger, as though the planet was slowly building toward an inevitable crescendo. He pressed his hands into the cold, rough surface of the stones and closed his eyes, letting the hum wash through him. Visions came again, not memories this time, but glimpses of the immediate future. Civilizations toppled not from war, but from forces beyond human understanding. Cities fractured under storms that did not follow weather patterns. Forests spread in ways that disrupted entire communities. And people were forced to confront the fragility of what they had built. But amid the chaos, there were sparks of something else. He saw individuals who adapted, who learned to listen to the planet, to work with the forces instead of resisting. Communities that shared resources helped one another, and respected the patterns of nature survived longer than those who acted in fear or greed. The wanderer understood that the conflict was not purely destruction, was a test. And the margin for error was terrifyingly small, far away. A scientist in a research facility stared at her monitors, unable to comprehend what was unfolding. The machines had begun to display symbols she had never seen, patterns that seemed both mathematical and organic at once. She tried to decode them, but every calculation led to contradictions. It was as if the planet had found a language humans could not yet understand. Her hands shook as the machines pulsed in rhythm with the hum she now felt in her own bones. Something monumental was approaching, and no one had the power to stop it. In another city, a child watched the spiraling storms outside her window. Lightning split the clouds in impossible angles, striking without warning, yet somehow avoiding buildings and people. She whispered to herself that the storms were alive, and perhaps, in some secret way, she understood it better than the adults around her. Her parents dismissed her, but she could feel the pulse in the ground beneath the floorboards. Small but insistent, the wanderer moved deeper into the forest that night, guided by the vibrations. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the undergrowth, and the trees seemed to lean toward him, as if observing, as if aware of his every move. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and something else, something metallic, sharp, almost like ozone. He felt an irresistible pull, a sense that the planet itself was directing him toward a center, a place where he could witness the culmination of what had begun months ago. When the first white lights appeared, he arrived at a cliff edge that overlooked a valley he had never seen. The valley was alive with strange motion. Rivers ran in impossible curves, forests shifted subtly in patterns he could not name, and the air above shimmered as if charged with energy. The glow from the valley below was faint but constant, pulsing in rhythm with the hum he felt through his chest. Somewhere far below, the planet's energy coalesced like a heartbeat, growing stronger with each passing second. From the skies, storms moved with deliberate precision. Tornadoes formed and dissolved without destroying a single structure. Yet their existence alone forced evacuation, disarray, and fear. Lightning struck repeatedly, tracing patterns that resembled ancient symbols. The wanderer realized the planet was communicating not through words, but through action, and every storm, every river shift, every flicker of light was part of an enormous, living message. He wasn't alone. Others had begun to arrive, people drawn by the strange phenomena, drawn by instinct or by dreams they couldn't explain. Some were frightened, some skeptical, some awed. All of them felt the pull of the valley and the pulse beneath the earth. They gathered at the cliff's edge, watching the surreal display unfold, knowing that the next moment could change everything. Tension rippled through the crowd. Arguments erupted. Some insisted they should leave, that the signs were too dangerous. Others demanded to move closer, to understand, to witness. Fear and wonder collided, and the wanderer could feel the energy in the air respond. Almost like the planet itself was judging them. The vibrations in the ground intensified. The hum became a roar. Small tremors shook the cliff beneath their feet. Birds circled overhead in dizzying formations, and creatures in the forest below moved with synchronized precision, as if responding to a conductor they could not see. The air was electric, thick with tension, charged with anticipation. In a nearby city, panic was reaching its peak. People abandoned homes, leaving possessions behind. Roads became clogged with vehicles, fleeing erratically. Emergency broadcasts warned of disasters that could not be predicted or contained. Across continents, the same scenes repeated: confusion, fear, and the unmistakable presence of something larger than humanity. Back at the cliff, the wanderer noticed faint, glowing lines tracing along the valley floor. Rivers, streams, and even roads appeared to light up in response to the pulse, moving like veins beneath the earth. The patterns converged toward a single point, a small plateau deep in the valley that seemed to emit its own faint glow. The hum had become deafening, vibrating not only through the ground but through the very air. The trees, the people themselves. He stepped closer to the edge, feeling the ground tremble beneath him. The others followed cautiously, some whispering prayers, some recording every movement on devices that now seemed inadequate to capture the magnitude of what was happening. The valley below was no longer just a place, was a stage, a living tableau orchestrated by Earth itself. The wanderer's vision sharpened. He could see the pulse forming a pattern, a spiral that twisted inward, drawing energy toward the glowing plateau. The light there was brighter now, almost blinding. And then, as he watched, it pulsed in a sudden, violent rhythm. And the valley itself seemed to inhale, drawing the air, the rivers, the forests, and even the creatures into a single, synchronized movement. The crowd gasped. Some fell to their knees. The air vibrated with a low-frequency resonance that made voices tremble, windows rattle, and hearts race. The storms above intensified, spiraling faster, lightning cracking closer with precise rhythm. A sense of impending climax gripped everyone present. Something was about to happen, something Earth had been building toward for centuries. The wanderer felt his chest tighten. The pulse had reached a level that no human body should have endured. He could feel the valley preparing to release its energy, the planet ready to act with force, intention, and judgment. He realized that humanity was on the brink, and the world could either witness survival or devastation in a single, overwhelming moment. Across the globe, similar pulses echoed, though less intense, rippling through cities, forests, and oceans. People everywhere sensed the approaching crescendo, some responding with fear, some with awe, but all unable to ignore it. The planet's message was nearing its climax. And nothing could stop the momentum now, as the glow from the plateau grew brighter. The ground trembled in waves that rolled outward like invisible shock waves. The hum became a roar, drowning all other sound, and the air above the valley shimmered violently. The crowd at the cliff edge felt the pressure mounting, the energy pressing down like an invisible weight, suffocating and exhilarating at the same time. The wanderer clenched his fists, knowing that the moment of reckoning was near. The planet had built toward this with deliberate patience, using subtle movements, tests, and warnings. Now, every light, every vibration, every anomaly pointed to a single truth. Earth was about to demonstrate its fury in a way humanity had never experienced. And then, as if pausing for dramatic intent, the glow from the plateau pulsed once more longer, brighter and sharper than anything before. A wave of energy swept upward, scattering the birds, rippling the rivers, bending the trees. The valley held its breath. The crowd trembled. Even the storms in the sky seemed to hesitate, frozen in anticipation of what was about to unfold. The wanderer took a deep breath, feeling the pulse echoing in his bones, and realized the climax was imminent. Every moment leading up to this had been preparation, every subtle shift a signal, every tremor a warning. And now, the planet's power, its fury, its intention, was about to break fully into the world. Time seemed to stretch. The air vibrated with expectation. The glow reached a blinding intensity, and the hum became almost unbearable. The wanderer's heart pounded in rhythm with the planet's pulse, every nerve alive with awareness of what was coming. And then, just as the first wave of unimaginable force began to ripple across the valley, a sudden, sharp stillness fell. The entire world seemed to hold its breath. The climax was here, Earth's fury poised to strike, humanity poised on the edge of reckoning, and the wanderer caught between awe, fear, and responsibility. The moment hung suspended, impossibly long, and the world waited for the first act of what could not yet be undone. The moment stretched, a heartbeat of eternity, before the valley and the world beyond seemed to exhale. The air, once charged with unbearable energy, shifted, settling like a tide retreating from the shore. Tremors softened, the glow from the plateau dimmed, leaving the valley bathed in a soft, otherworldly light. The crowd on the cliff edge staggered, many sinking to their knees, overwhelmed by what they had witnessed. The wanderer remained standing, feeling the pulse in his chest fade into a deep, echoing calm. All around, the effects of Earth's fury were clear, but they were not uniform devastation. In some regions, forests had shifted, forming protective barriers over cities. Rivers carved new paths, washing away structures but leaving fertile land behind. Coastal towns, once threatened by rising waters, now found exposed land ready for rebuilding. Nature had acted with both force and purpose. Earth's fury was not mindless destruction, but a judgment with intent. The wanderer finally sat, observing others as they began to grasp the scope of the transformation. There were tears, but also awe. People embraced each other, realizing survival required more than luck. It demanded attention, respect, and a willingness to listen. The storms and shifting lands punished recklessness, but spared those who had adapted. He recalled the scientist in the research facility, whose monitors had displayed incomprehensible symbols. Now, as the planet's pulse faded, those symbols made sense not as language, but as energy patterns, a communication between Earth and its inhabitants. She would go on to decode them, teaching humanity that Earth's fury was a message. Every species shared responsibility for the planet, and ignoring it came at a cost. Across cities, survivors assessed the damage, learning to live with the new landscapes rather than against them. Roads twisted into unusual curves but led to fertile farmland. Forests grew to shield water sources, and animals roamed freely, restoring balance. Humanity realized adaptation, cooperation, and understanding Earth's rhythms were no longer optional, they were essential. Around the cliffs and forests, groups formed around those who had listened first, those who had acted in respect of the planet's warnings. People shared survival knowledge, taught planting, and learned to read subtle signs in the weather. The child who had watched spiraling storms now led others in observing shifts in the air, guiding adults to notice what they had ignored. The planet's pulse had given humanity a gift, a second chance, but with it came responsibility. Storms, once terrifying, became guides. Lightning strikes revealed fertile soil and new river paths. Tornadoes carved clearings for rebuilding. Humanity began to see Earth's force as corrective, not punitive. Old, unsustainable ways were erased, and new, respectful methods encouraged. The wanderer spent days walking the transformed landscapes. The soil, rich and fertile, nourished life. Forests hummed with vitality, rivers shimmered with clarity, and the air felt alive with energy. Humans, for the first time, saw Earth not as a resource to exploit, but as a living entity with intention and power. Communities shared stories of survival. Entire cities were spared for living in harmony with nature, while some towns had suffered due to greed or neglect. These losses were painful, but they became lessons. Neglecting the planet had collective consequences. Every species had a role in shaping the world. Every species would now share responsibility. New leaders emerged, guiding reconstruction with sustainable structures and technologies. Education focused on planetary awareness, ecological understanding, and long-term thinking. The wanderer observed quietly, sensing that even in the shadow of Earth's fury, humanity could learn to thrive. The scientist emerged, exhausted but enlightened, sharing patterns of Earth's energy that had reshaped civilizations. Her discoveries allowed people to anticipate changes, turning fear into respect and anxiety into preparation. Humanity began to see itself as part of a larger story, where the planet was an active partner. Even the wanderer, once solitary, found himself embraced by communities recognizing his understanding of the planet's pulse. He taught others to sense vibrations in the ground, shifts in the air, and patterns in water and soil. Humanity learned to listen, bridging technology and intuition, science and instinct. Months passed, and the scars of fury began to heal. Forests stabilized, rivers flowed steadily, and communities thrived in harmony with the transformed landscape. Where fear once ruled, curiosity and determination now grew. People rebuilt differently, smarter, careful, and connected to the natural world. The lesson was clear. Neglecting Earth carried consequences. Honoring it ensured survival. The wanderer climbed the cliff one last time. The valley below had been tested and now emerged wiser, stronger, and united. Rivers shimmered with balanced patterns. Forests swayed rhythmically, and the wind whispered of promise. Humanity had been humbled, but it endured, learning to thrive in partnership with Earth rather than in conflict. As he turned to leave, he felt the faintest pulse beneath his feet, a steady, watchful vibration. The planet had acted, judged, and corrected. Humanity had been tested. And survival had brought awareness, responsibility, and hope. The child who had once watched storms ran through thriving fields, laughing as she pointed out patterns adults overlooked. Communities gathered around learning centers, teaching the next generation to observe, anticipate, and work with Earth's rhythms. Technology advanced, but always grounded in respect for the planet's power. In quiet moments, when wind rustled, trees or rivers glimmered, people felt it, a pulse beneath the ground, a hum in the air. A reminder that Earth was alive and aware. Fury remained in memory, but had transformed into vigilance, respect, and understanding. The wanderer took a final breath of valley air and smiled. Humanity had faced its mistakes, embraced change, and learned its lessons. Life continued, fragile but resilient, woven into the rhythm of a living Earth. Respect, awareness, and cooperation were no longer choices, they were survival. As the sun set over the transformed valleys, the wanderer walked away. Humanity had survived, learned, and begun a new chapter. The story of fury had ended, but awareness and coexistence had just begun. The planet had spoken, and humanity had finally listened.